The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, on Reality Radio 101. So get ready to talk, email, or post a message to us. We are looking forward to speaking with you. Our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowski.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad you're here today with me. We're going to have a very important topic, which is really suicide. And it's a topic that people generally don't speak about until something truly tragic occurs. And we really want to start to have this conversation long before the tragedy. You know, I believe that our job, all of us, is to recognize that we are connected and we need to be here for each other, bearing witness to evolving mind, mood, health. I personally have found that the most profound changes occur when a person truly feels heard and understood. I like to think of it as deeply bearing witness to life evolving. You know, we can feel incredibly stuck when we live with our fears, stresses, and troubles alone, but when we share and we feel deeply and powerfully connected to other people, it creates a foundation for us to move forward in understanding and care. Today we're very fortunate because we have Robert Olson with us, and he is working with the Center for Suicide Prevention, which is located in Calgary, Alberta. Now, Robert is a librarian and writer for the Center for Suicide Prevention, and he manages the largest English language library collection on suicide information in the world. So you can imagine he's done a lot of reading and understands this topic probably with such great depth that we are very fortunate to have that kind of expertise. Robert has spent time taking the material that he looks at in the library and translating it into meaningful resources, toolkits, articles, special features, and webinars. And he sits on several suicide prevention-related committees and participates as an expert panelist in public forums, gives media interviews, as he's doing today, and acts as a resource for suicide prevention information. Thank you so much, Robert, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Anna.
That's great. I understand that you've been doing this work since June 2011, and that you hold a master's in library information science, and that you weren't really too knowledgeable about suicide yourself prior to taking the job of this post. And I wonder what it's been like for you to find yourself in a role where you're really trying to understand this topic and speak about it from a place of real knowledge.
Well, thanks, Anna. Yeah, from the get-go, it's been a Well, initially it was a baptism by fire. I had to get to know the subject matter very quickly. The nature of a specialized library necessitates that, but even more so here because we did decide that we wanted to conduct a lot of knowledge translation of rendering the information in our repository into more accessible resources. So that required that I get up to speed on the subject matter, and which I did, and thankfully I find fascinating and continue to do so. And being a meaningful subject, it carries me forward.
Yeah, there's, I actually got a hold of media guidelines for reporting on suicide. It was a 2017 update of a Canadian Psychiatric Association policy paper, and it was actually available on the website, the Center for Suicide Prevention, and it's one of the best documents I've seen on the topic because, I think what we see in the media traditionally have been just these very, very unfortunate covering of terrible, events of well-known people, Kate Spade, Anthony Bourdain, people who were in the media recently where, their names are recognizable, and the coverage, just brings forward this terrible, sad, shocking realization that, when we feel despair, it doesn't matter whether we have fame and fortune. That makes no difference whatsoever. That something very deep within inside of ourselves could be in such a wounded place that, none of these things really help us to face that level of distress. And, one of the recommendations in this article was that health reporters, people who understand health issues rather than crime reporters, are the best people to cover these kinds of matters because instead of it being some graphic presentation of some really tragic story, we come to it with, an understanding not only of how to present these things so it leads to the least amount of potential harm, because, there are stats that show that there's an increase of suicidal actions, people taking their lives or doing things that could threaten their lives after these kinds of graphic details come out in the media. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, exactly. The coverage of Kate Spade and Anthony Bourdain in particular, I think it was better done than suicide's been covered in the past. For one reason, it showed, as you spoke to just a moment ago, about how despite their wealth and fame and seemingly wonderful lives, that they themselves succumb to suicide, that it can affect absolutely everybody. On the other hand, what the guidelines suggest that is not done is to focus on the method and how they died, and to glamorize that it was somehow the only way to solve their problems, to suggest that either indirectly or directly. So I feel in comparison from what I've read of the way it was covered in the past, it has improved considerably, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done. There was a period that precipitated the creation of these guidelines where rather than risk covering suicide in a negative way, that a lot of the traditional media didn't cover it at all, and that was a pendulum swing from a previous era where a lot of the sensational coverage was done for decades. So.
Yeah, exactly. It's quite interesting. It's really good that you're saying that. I'm glad to hear that because it's hard to know, what your opinion is because you see so much of this on a daily basis. I mean, I deal with this in my office, and I do see people who speak of, suicidal ideation and struggles with deep, deep despair, and just how important it is to have a landing place where people can talk about these issues and actually do it with some sense that who they're speaking to can be compassionate about the level of distress and despair they're experiencing, and start to, unpackage some of the issues that have led them to that level of despair. There are a lot of things to be aware of when we consider suicidality, but, I think one of the most important things is, where are people supposed to go? What are they supposed to do? And why don't we just start with that? If you find that right now, if you're listening to this and you've been feeling, like you're struggling, you don't even have to be suicidal, because most of the calls that come into these helplines, they're not necessarily people who are ready to do it. They're people who just feel so sad and hopeless that, the thoughts have come to their mind, and that's enough to make that first call. So maybe you can share some of the resources that you know about, Robert.
Well, I understand this is going across Canada. I know that there's a national line that we have now, and just let me grab that for you.
So just while you're finding that number, I'm just going to tell people that I came across a beautiful resources. It's on a website called metonia.org, and I'm going to spell that out because I think it's one of the. I've been doing some research for the last couple of days, and I think this is one of the most beautiful pieces that I have yet come across. And I'm going to read you a little bit from Metonia, and I'm going to spell out the name of the website because I want you to have the access to it. And also, if you need this link, definitely let us know. We're also going to provide it on the YouTube channel, and we're going to add it to the podcast. It's metanoia.org, and the title is, and you can just type this into any Google search. If you are thinking about suicide, read this first. And like I said, I think it's one of the nicest resources I have come across. Now, just think about this. If you're feeling suicidal now, please stop long enough to read this. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. That would take me quite a while, but I'm going to read a little bit of it because I want you to consider this. First, if you are feeling suicidal, go to this page or, do a Google search. If you're thinking about suicide, read this first at metonia.org. And, the idea is that you want to know that there are people that you could reach out to. You want to know that actually, your life does matter. And the really beautiful and interesting thing is if you just take a little while and you really let yourself remember there were moments that you have already lived that were lovely, that were good enough, moments that reminded you that, things are okay right now. And that as hard as it is, and it really is hard because when you're in the moment of despair, it's hard to remember that things can get better. Because when you're in that bad place, it's like it's just really tough to kind of believe that. So I get it. I understand that. And I'm gonna share a little story of my own so that you understand that I do understand that. Not too long ago, I found myself in a setting where I was one of a number of professionals, and usually I have a lot of things to say about a lot of things. So as usual, I would contribute whatever I felt was meaningful for me to contribute. And the person who was running the program, I don't know if he felt threatened or uncomfortable or whatever, but boy, did he ever call me out. And I just felt really quite bad, and I felt bad about myself because it was hard for me to put it in context at that moment. Why was I getting this kind of negative attention from this person who was actually running the show and, really didn't have to, put me down, but somehow felt that was a meaningful thing to do. And I know that, suicidal feelings and bullying and harassment can be very strongly tied. So I think that's really pretty common. So again, now I'm going to refer you back to this article. Suicide is not chosen. It happens when pain exceeds resources for coping with pain. I love this because really it gives two options. We look for new resources and we reduce the pain. And those are the two things that I would ask you to think about. Figure out what helps you reduce the pain and what resources do you need or can you add that will help you do that. So, again, another piece from this article that I just love is give yourself some distance. Say to yourself, I will wait 24 hours before I do anything, or a week, or after I finish whatever it is, the thing that you want to finish, or, give yourself some kind of goal and then reassess. But give yourself that time and allow yourself to choose something. I find really interesting is sometimes after people have felt very suicidal, they allow themselves to do things that they've been holding themselves back from doing. In one case, somebody told me that they've always really wanted to dance. And, they kind of felt embarrassed by that. But it turned out to be such a source of joy and a release of stress and pressure that it became part of their recovery. And so remember, for most of us, there are things that we can do that will lighten our spirits and increase our sense of joy, or at least give us a sense that, we have some resources and life can be better than what we're experiencing right now. I believe in therapy for sure. Let yourself get engaged in that. And, the other thing about this article is it just gives a ton of resources. And, the other thing that I really like is that they reference the Samaritans, who are trained volunteers, and they respond to emails and text messages. So, wherever you are in the world, you can send an email to the Samaritans. You have to Google this online and find some details about that. Okay, so I think that you probably have that number for us now.
Yes, I have, and I just want to say, Samaritans, United Kingdom group, very respected, and they do wonderful work. So thank you for relating that. The Canadian line is toll-free 1-833-456-4566, and the American National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is 1-800-273-8255.
Great. Can you keep those numbers handy? Because I'm going to ask you to repeat that throughout our conversation today. And remember, not only are we in the U.S. and Canada, but we are actually hitting a global audience at this point. So if you have an email to share, please email instudio101@gmail.com. And I'm going to read our first email of the day. Hi, Lisa. Lisa says, I have some strong feelings about this topic that I'd like to share with you. I'm sure you will probably cover these, but I still wanted to send this email. 1, we have to eliminate the stigma that surrounds mental health. We have to talk more, open up conversations, and take away shame. Yeah, I really believe in that, and I believe it's really important for us to seek out, people that can be kind and respond with compassion when they encounter somebody who is struggling. Now, I'm going to tell another story really quickly, because I do so much work with individuals who've been exposed to, well, let's just say very difficult things in the course of their work. I'm not going to go into a lot of details about the individual or the person, what they do or anything like that. But let's just say that this one person reached out to a friend and shared that he was in so much emotional pain that he didn't know how he was going to make it through. And he was, really making some, clear indicators that he was heading down a path, certainly was having suicidal thoughts and heading down a very dangerous path. And this person was reaching out, hoping to get some kindness from this person, but instead the individual became angry. Don't bother me with this. The response was so unkind. And when I heard the response, I realized that it must have taken incredible courage for this individual to, continue to take another step towards somebody else who, in the end, did turn out to be much kinder and much more respectful. But that first response was very harsh. And what I would suggest that if you do reach out to somebody and they're just not able to, that's not about you. That's about the individual. Maybe that person has emotional struggles themselves, or hearing about your despair just is too much for them to bear. And that is not something for you to feel responsible for. It's just an indicator that this is not the right person, and it's time to find people or groups to join where kindness and compassion and an understanding how to speak about these issues is really kind of better embraced. Then Lisa goes on to say, we have to remember that people who are in emotional distress isolate themselves. We have to remember that people who are in emotional distress feel shame and are not thinking rationally. We have to remember that in this state, it feels virtually impossible to reach out and say, please help me, or I'm hurting, or I can't do this anymore. So, Robert, could you help us a little bit with this tendency to isolate when in emotional distress?
Well, certainly, yeah. That's one of the chief characteristics of being in suicidal crisis is just this mental constriction of thought where preoccupation is with ending the pain that's going on within, and at the expense of how loved ones feel, how anyone else feels. In fact, it could. Suicidal folks are often labeled as being selfish, and I think it's being in that state, almost not quite, but almost oblivious to everyone around you that they may be unfairly tagged with that term, selfish, when it's just they can't get out of that state. It's to think about others when in a crisis such as that, it is next to impossible. So.
Yeah, it's an amazing thing that that term selfish, and I get why that happens, because the individual who is witnessing it, somehow on some level takes it personally, when in fact nobody who is in that much pain and suffering is really being selfish. I mean, there's nothing selfish about that level of pain. When somebody is struggling with that, it's a pretty big thing to face, and it can feel incredibly lonely. So Lisa goes on to say, it's so important to reach out, but reaching out doesn't mean via social media, text messages. Reaching out means having voice conversations. Actually, this is such a good point, Lisa, because I think actually in some ways social media makes people feel more isolated, because there's this comparison thing that happens when we look at all those pretty posts or pictures of people doing things with their family, or attending some kind of social gathering, or whatever it is. It just can feel even more isolating. So thank you so much for raising that issue. Lisa, this is going to be with someone in distress in person. We have to remember the power of human touch and kindness. I agree. You know what? That is such a beautiful thing to say. And I think, just sitting with somebody and looking at them and seeing their warmth as they look back at us. And, when we share a space with somebody and we can feel their emotional kindness, it can be such a relief. Lisa goes on to say, I believe that the place of suffering is between what others think they see and what they are so afraid to encounter. It takes enormous amounts of compassion and courage to go there and be with somebody in such pain. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing these words. And Lisa goes on to just say, Anna, thank you for helping open up these conversations and making this type of suffering more visible. And you are so welcome, and thank you for your courage to send this in and reach out to us and be part of that conversation. I very much appreciate that as well. So that's a beautiful distribution too. What do you think about social media, Robert?
Well, it's kind of as you alluded to, it has its pros and cons. I mean, for someone who may be socially isolated, it is an avenue perhaps where they can reach out, mm-hmm. But at the same time, it can be a forbidding place too. Just the images and the information they see of others, it might inhibit their seeking help just because of, wow, compared to them, I'm just so inconsequential. It's It's
that terrible comparison, right?
Yeah, it's very real, and so like many things in life, I guess we have to just focus on the benefits of it. It's not going anywhere, and it's in most of our lives.
So here's another question, and this one comes from Diane. I'm hoping I've pronounced that correctly. Hi, Dr. Anna. A very simple question: Who is at risk for suicide? Any early symptoms to watch for? And I think there are a lot of things to watch for, and I think there are tremendous issues to address here. But I'm going to put that back to you. I'm actually interested in the question as well from your perspective. What are we looking at right now, Robert, in terms of who is at risk? Because I do know some of the stats are showing that men are more at risk of completion, and there's certain age ranges, something like in the early to late 40s is a pretty high risk factor for men, and women are also at risk in that age range as well as teens. But maybe you can clarify that and also talk a little bit about the early symptoms that we should be watching for, because you've got your finger on the pulse of that research.
Right. Yeah, it's a shocking statistic that most people aren't aware of, but yeah, it's men, middle-aged men, who die by suicide the most, so age 40 to 60, and second, men aged 20 to 40. And men tend to, in Canada and the United States as well, die by suicide at a 3-to-1 ratio to women. Why is that? The chief reasons we believe is help-seeking behaviors that men as a whole lack in comparison with women.
That's a really, really good point. This avoidance of reaching out for care, really. I mean, and how men get this really unfortunate feedback that somehow it's not okay for them to reach out for care. And I mean, my practice is a little bit unique in that probably more than 65% of my clients are male, and I know that there's a big stigma, but I feel that it has changed in the last 10 years, and I'm hoping it's more and more so going to go in that direction. What would help people feel that it's okay? What would help these men feel that it's okay?
Well, I mean, to start talking about it, I was just going to finish though, but the chief reason, though, in addition to the lack of help-seeking behaviors, is the choice of method that men use. We men tend to use more lethal means, so there's a higher chance of lethality with a suicide attempt.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Other signs that people need to be aware of.
Giving away possessions. A pronounced difference in behavior, and that can work both ways. Say someone who is historically cheery becomes depressive, and the other way around. Because often if someone is, say, down, and then all of a sudden they appear happy, sometimes, rarely, but it does happen, it's because they've resigned themselves to finally making that decision and devising a plan to kill themselves, so they're almost at peace with their decision, and it'll come across as a perhaps cheerfulness that was lacking before. So just in a comprehensive way, a change in behavior for sure, and saying things like people will be better off without me. Giving off signals that they feel like they're a burden to others, that their lives don't matter.
And it's really interesting because from the observer's position, I mean, having heard these types of things with my clients, I'm always in a state of kind of, I'm always in this really kind of puzzled state, because it's very clear from the outside that this is a loved person, or this person has some reason to live. Like it, you can see the pain and the suffering, but the words that the individual uses to describe themselves and their lack of value often do not fit who they really are.
Yes.
And that is always a remarkable thing to witness. It's not that, I don't want to diminish the pain that's going on, but the truth of it is that whatever you are believing in that moment is not necessarily an accurate depiction of whether people actually love you or would miss you or value you or would, no matter what kind of trouble you're in, still want you in their lives. That's what it really comes down to. I just want to say that somebody's making a comment here. We've got another email from Grace, and she says, is the library that Robert administers open to the public, or is it for research for professionals only? And I'm just going to mention that Robert works with the Center for Suicide Prevention. And Robert, maybe you can answer that question.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes, we are open to the public if they wish to come and visit us. We don't get nearly as much face-to-face traffic as we do online, but if you could give my email, your listeners are certainly welcome to write me, and I can give fuller details of what our library consists of and what our hours are and such facts as that.
Yeah, okay, so thank you so much. So how would they get in touch with you?
Okay, so my email is Robert at suicideinfo, that's one word, so suicideinfo.ca.
Perfect, great. So if people would like to get in touch with Robert for some resources, he is available for that. And if you want to email us, it is at instudio101@gmail.com. Become part of this conversation. We want to hear from you. Now we get an email from Janice who says, besides counseling, are there long-term medications to help with this behavior? I only ask since we cannot always be around a counselor, medical professional, or a good friend. So are there maintenance drugs that can help? Okay. Janice, thank you for that question. First of all, sure, if, let's say, for example, one of the issues here is that there's a real imbalance in, let's say, serotonin in your brain, and your mood is just never leveling off. You're always in a state of pretty severe depression, and the serotonin will help with that. Sure, definitely medications can be beneficial. However, without all the other things in place, like lifestyle changes and self-acceptance and a sense of living your life in an authentic way and saying no when you mean no and not yes, and doing things that you love because you love them, and surrounding yourself with people who maybe you're not going to see them all the time, but if you know that in 2 days you've got lunch with somebody who you really liked, these are things that are actually very beneficial. Because overall, it's not about having somebody by your side all the time. It's really about kind of constructing a life that overall feels meaningful for you, for who you are. And absolutely, if you feel that it would be beneficial to speak to a psychiatrist about the right medication, then absolutely I would recommend that. However, I'm not a psychiatrist and I don't prescribe, so I don't want to start naming off medications. It's just that the other thing is that we know that medication on its own is not as good as therapy and all these other lifestyle changes that I'm talking about. One of the things that I find is really, really beneficial is learning to join. And when I say learning to join, I'm talking about finding people or groups or, different activities where, you feel like these are people who have, kindness. It's just part of the way, this group of people operate. Maybe it's a meditation group, or you find yourself at a small gym and people are just kind of kind there, or, you found that, you can join a walking group or a bowling club, whatever it is. Like, this is not about finding something that would make me happy. It's about finding who you are and asking yourself, sure, day to day you may be busy with a job or have, responsibilities, but what can you put in place every single day that feeds and nourishes you for who you are? That's restorative. Robert, your thoughts on that?
Oh, I agree wholeheartedly. We definitely advocate for positive well-being and steps and endeavors that one can take to build a more. They're kind of like you can think of them as proactive steps, maybe to offset any potential negative consequences you may encounter down the road. So think of it as just steps to take to help ensure that these adverse consequences or episodes that all of us, or most of us, encounter on some level in our lives can be met and dealt with, right, in a better fashion.
Great. So we've got another email, and this one is from Portia Williams, and she says, I'd like to weigh in on the topic of suicide. I'm a suicide intervention instructor, and Portia is a veteran. So you know what? Portia has given me a telephone number, and I'm going to call that right now and see what Portia would like to say, and see if we can get somebody online for just a minute. Let's see how that goes. I don't know if Portia will answer, but if you're listening, I am calling you right now. You hear that? So let's see how that goes, and while we're waiting to see if Portia answers.
Hi, I'm here.
Hi, how are you?
I am well. How are you?
Good, I'm great. You answered your phone. That's like a rarity.
Oh, yes, I'm listening to the project.
Okay, so I want to hear what your thoughts are.
Yes. I'm sorry, I'm trying to turn on the volume on my phone so that I hope you all can hear me. How are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. I see here that you are the president and CEO of Restore Life, LLC, and you're a Navy veteran, and you are a veteran. Yeah, you're a veteran mental health advisory council member, and you probably have a lot to say about this topic, so I'd like to kind of hear what's going on with you, Portia.
All right, how are you? So I am the CEO of Restore Life, LLC. And what we do is we shed awareness and light, not just on suicide prevention, but on the intervention piece, right? And I think that I totally believe, and I'm sorry, not solely, but I truly believe that the way that we reduce these numbers of suicide is to train everyone in intervention. So in our class, we have different surveys, and we ask, in the time of crisis, who would you ask if you wanted to hurt yourself, right? And so you have one column, and it says, we have clergy and maybe a doctor or a therapist, and then you have the other side where it says, well, friends, family members, co-workers, and I promise you, every time we hold this class, the highest numbers are always in the friends section, right? So we have a lot of awareness on prevention. You can look up prevention anywhere. You can know the signs and the symptoms. And one of the things that is very common is that sometimes there are no signs and symptoms, right? You have those who are smilers, those who cover what it is that they are feeling. And I can tell you personally because I am a survivor. So this topic is very personal to me because after, my failed attempt, I begin to understand the value of life, and I begin to understand what my purpose was and how to help others be able to get through this time. The intervention module, and it actually originated there in Canada, is called Living Works, their assist class, their 2-day assist class. And so what it does is it teaches not just the signs, and that's what everyone teaches, but it teaches how to have that conversation. Because if someone reaches out to you and say, hey, I'm thinking about hurting myself or something like that, some people may say things like, well, you don't want to do something stupid. Or, things like, well, why would you do that? Or it's not that serious. You don't know what that person is feeling. You know what I mean? So it's very important to be able to not just understand the signs, but to be able to have that conversation and keep them safe for now. We have been all around the country spreading this message and teaching these classes because we really believe that if during these times, the person closest to them, the family member, the cousin, the coworker, whoever, as long as the more that we spread this training, the more lives that we will be able to save and that we will be able to keep safe for now. So that's one of the biggest pieces that I think is missing when it comes to by way of suicide. More oftentimes than not, the people that are trained in suicide intervention are the crisis line workers, are professionals, and clinicians and things like that. But the people that need to be trained in suicide intervention is everyone, because this reaches everyone. This affects the babies, it affects the veterans, it affects everyone. So it doesn't really have a demographic. And if everyone was trained to keep someone safe for now, I think that it would significantly impact those numbers.
Oh, you are so amazing, Portia. I'm so glad I called you. This is like a total, just at the last minute. You're just so on target. Like it makes me so happy to hear your words and your passion. And I love the term "keep them safe for now." I was a little bit concerned when I heard in your training. It sounds like you spend a little bit of time. You ask people like who would they reach out to, and everybody says friends. And the part that really concerns me is that I know personally that some people feel like there aren't people they can turn to, and they don't feel that they can really tell this to their friends. Like they feel like it's a secret. Like what are your thoughts on that, Portia?
So 8 out of 10 people reach out, right? When they have those thoughts, and that is a stat that I got from the Suicide Prevention Lifeline. So when they reach out, what would it feel like for you if you reached out or if you sent an invitation to someone and they did not accept your invitation? Or they didn't open it or respond? How would that make you feel?
Exactly. And so I had just given this example of a client who reached out to somebody and got a very cold, uncaring response. And what courage it took for this person to take the next step and to call somebody else, reach out to somebody else, find somebody who really can listen, can really respond with the right kind of heart. Like, because, isn't that what it's all about in the end? This is all about the heart.
It is, and then it's also understanding the signs that they're sending. Sometimes they don't always say, hey, I want to kill myself. Sometimes it comes in form of not showering. Sometimes it comes in form of not eating, not sleeping. Someone that you know to be bubbly, not being bubbly anymore. Sometimes you have people who get into trouble, in excessive trouble, because that's their way of reaching out. You have to be able to understand and see what it is that it looks like and understand that it's something deeper that they may be exhibiting. My very first suicide intervention that I did, now I have been strong in this for about 8 months. And so in the last 8 months, I've done 76 interventions by way of social media. media, and within the VA with veterans and within my family members, right? And so the way that my first intervention reached out was that he sent me access to control his page in case anything happened to him.
Oh, okay.
And so I was asleep. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm wondering, what is going on? So I asked him, I said, are you okay? He said, yeah. I said, okay, cool. I'm going to sleep. And then I sat up and I thought about it. I said, wait a minute.
Right.
You're 30 years old like I'm 30 years old. What is going to happen to you in the near future? Let me dig a little deeper. It's about caring and having that conversation.
Wow. Portia, you said that you're also a suicide survivor, and I'm just wondering, like, what really worked in your recovery? You talking with so much passion, and you sound so vibrant right now. Like, how did you navigate that?
So after my attempt, so what happened was I want to say it was the best experience that I could have ever had in my life. I had went through a lot of different traumas from, post-traumatic stress disorder to military sexual trauma, coming out trying to hold all the things on my own while being a mother, and then, living with and dealing with a man that was incredibly toxic for me. And so he sent me into this downward spiral when I had found out that he was cheating with my best friend. It took me over the edge. I couldn't take it anymore. I gave up. And so before giving up, the things that were vital to the situation was this. I reached out to my sister, who was a mental health professional, and she said, oh, I'm calling the police. Well, wait a minute. I just thinking about it. Well, maybe I really have to do it. Go ahead and do it now. These are the thoughts that went through my mind. So being in tune with what I was going through, looking at my signs, when I woke up, I had took a half bottle of pills. And so when I woke up the next day, I was sick, incredibly sick, and I had to actually be rushed to the hospital. But when I came out of that, and I went into inpatient. I went to inpatient for 2 weeks, and so, there I had the chance to be able to not be okay, and it be okay.
I love that.
I did not have to be perfect.
Good, because there's too much of that going on.
Yeah, you don't have to be perfect. We all struggle. We all have things that's going on.
Absolutely.
You never know what someone else may know, who someone else may know, or how closely your solution could be right there.
Yeah.
So I did. I went to an intensive therapy called psychosocial recovery rehabilitative counseling at the Washington, D.C. VA Medical Center. And between them and trauma services is where I got my toolbox. I learned how to deal with my anxiety. I learned how to deal with my depression. I learned how to fight those suicidal ideations. And I just want to be clear for everyone that is listening, suicidal ideations are not abnormal. We have them. And it is okay. It's about what you do with those ideations. It's about what you do with that. Unchecked ideation will turn into behaviors. Unchecked behaviors will result in either death or harm. So that's what we teach, and that's what we instill. What we instill in people and in these classes of intervention is what crisis line workers take to be able to keep people safe. And I think that it's so very important. That element is so very important. You never know. Our children, oh my God, our children are suffering. They're living in this age of social media. They're dealing with trying to always stay, have a certain appearance, and they want to have a certain many of lives. And if anything goes wrong with the internet, their business is everywhere, and they just live under this enormous ton of pressure. And these children are killing themselves at a massive rate, right? And I just want to be able to include, I know that your last presenter had given the hotline number. I also want to give the text line number because children are more comfortable texting than they are calling, and that's 741-741 if you are in the U.S. That's the text line number here.
Say it again.
It's 741-741.
741-741.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Hey, Portia, I really appreciate you joining us today. I'm going to let you go. It just was amazing to hear what you had to say. Any last things you want to say before I sign off with you?
Well, I just want to let everyone know that, again, I just want to emphasize, while we're trying to end the stigma of suicide, I want everyone to understand that suicide is not always attached to mental health, right? So it doesn't have a look. People think that it's always mental health. It's not always. In fact, 54% of people who have completed suicide did not have any mental health history. This is something that can touch everyone. Be kind and be generous. And if you want to, contact me or reach me, my website is www.restoredlifellc.com. My story is there, and I speak. I give motivational speeches, and I inspire, and I teach. And this is the message that everyone is spreading.
Well, you certainly do inspire and teach, and I just want to thank you for your time. And, you've really given us all a gift today, Portia, so thank you.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Portia. Okay, fantastic. That was so beautiful hearing what she had to say. What are your thoughts, Robert?
Oh, she was wonderful. She mentioned ASSIST, and that stands for Applied Suicide Intervention Training.
Yeah,
and
right here in Canada.
Yeah, and our center actually created that back in 1981. The founders of the Center for Suicide Prevention then went off and started Living Works, which you referred to, which is also in Calgary too, and we work closely with them to this day. So
I'm just curious, Robert, how would people find out about the training that your organization still offers? Because I think there might be some people who would really benefit from that.
Oh, sure, yeah. I mean, it's on our website, World Wide Web, www.suicideinfo.ca, and there's a tab for training, and then there's a tab for resources, which is what I represent, the library and all our different online resources and print resources that are available too. But if they were curious about the training, there's full descriptions of them, of the various workshops that we offer and have. So I invite your listeners to visit our site.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the website, and it really does have, quite an impressive list of resources and articles and just kind of things that you can really get engaged in. There's even a Ask a Librarian link, so if you prefer being online and you don't want to email directly, you can just go to the website and get in touch with the programs and what's available through Robert Olson as well. I think it's an amazing resource, and I think it's really interesting that so much of this work was developed in Canada, and it looks like a large amount of this material was created at the organization that you're working with, the Center for Suicide Prevention. We got an email from Marla, and Marla is asking, can you please repeat the web address you gave for the article you recommended reading if you're feeling suicidal? Absolutely. Do you know what? I have to say, this is such a nice article that I think that, it's useful for whoever you are. If you're a clinician, a therapist, if you're working as a first responder, if you're a veteran, if you just kind of feeling, in despair, you're a teacher, you work with students, you're a student, you're feeling bullied, whoever you are, Metanoia.org, METANOIA.org, and it is such a great resource. And I'll just read you one more thing from here. Suicidal feelings are in and of themselves traumatic. Remember that. After you subside, you'll need to continue caring for yourself. Therapy is a really good idea. So there are various self-help groups in the community, on the internet. Get involved. It's interesting because Portia really gave us a big gift today. Not only did she use this phrase, keep them safe for now, but I think it's reasonable for us to say to ourselves, just right now, what do I need to do just right now? And if just right now is going to that website or reading that letter or doing a Google search, if you're thinking about suicide, read this first. Do that. Text somebody. Use the helpline. Whatever resources can be made available for you. Make use of them. You are worth the effort. Life can be a blessing, but sometimes, as Portia demonstrated for us, sometimes you do face some terrible times before you have the gift of recovery. And I mean, we all kind of listened to Portia, and she sounded pretty passionate, even though she'd experienced some real trouble and trauma. And that's really beautiful in itself, that, we have to remember that, sometimes when people have these very, very dark moments, it's hard to remember that life can look very different in a very short time, and that because we feel despair right now does not mean that that is the way our life will continue to unfold. I want to tell you about a couple of apps that you can download if you want to. There's a lot of materials online, but I came across a couple that I thought were pretty good. One is the Lifeline. Are you familiar with that one, Robert?
Is that the one that is put out by the American telephone line network, or is that in reference to it?
I'm not really sure who's putting this out. It doesn't look like it's specific. I can't see who puts it out, but it is literally called The Lifeline. And the really interesting thing about this one is it's very comprehensive. It has Canadian crisis centers, global crisis centers, attempt survivors of suicide loss, after suicide, how I can get help, prevention and awareness. It's just got a ton of resources, and it's very well organized, and I really think that it is one of the better resources out there. So if you have a smartphone and you can download The Lifeline, sorry?
I believe that's Crisis Services Canada that puts that out.
And I do believe it's Canadian, but it looks like a pretty nice resource. Another one that I came across was Help Prevent Suicide, and that's in the U.S., and it has a national suicide prevention lifeline that is 24/7, and it is 1-800-273-8255, and it also has great resources, warning signs, and how to help and help guidelines, and things like that. So we've only got a couple of minutes left. Is there anything else that you would like to say, Robert? I just want to give you one more thing from Juanita, who says, "Hi, Anna and Robert. What a great show. Such a very important topic that takes so many lives. Thank you for discussing it." Robert, your last words.
Well, Anna, I just want to commend you for having this as a topic on your show, because, as you said, it is very significant, very important that we talk about it, and I'm glad that we could spend an hour doing just that. And the more forums such as this that we engage in, the better.
Yeah, I agree, absolutely. And I want to thank you for joining us today and making the resources of your fabulous organization and the position that you're in with the Center for Suicide Prevention available to us. I feel very grateful that you were able to take the time to speak with us. And just to let people know, I want to just point you to a couple more resources, and then I'm going to sign off. First, I want to say, please be gentle with yourself. Let's take the words of the lovely Portia. Keep safe for now. Just give yourself that time and figure out what resources that you could put in place so that the pain is not as deep and difficult to face. What can you do right now to either help yourself or help another person? There are some great videos. Russell Brand talking about suicide. He does a beautiful job addressing the issue of communication, connection, and community, all things that I believe in. Kevin Hines tells his story of surviving suicide. It's a very short link on Dr. Oz. It's worth listening to. And I wish all of you a gentle day. Be kind to yourself, and I will look forward to speaking with you next month. Thank you again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with your host, Dr. Anna Baranowski, right here on Reality Radio 101.